So welcome everyone. Welcome to the Coaching to Flourish podcast. I'm your host, Raj Anderson, Executive Life Coach and Coach Assessor. And I'm here with John Andrew Williams, the founder of Coach Training EDU. And I think you caught the beginning of our conversation. So John, would you like to share with the audience what's up and coming?
Yeah, so we have, it's been on my list, my list of things to rework the business building materials for Coach Training EDU and to put on basically organization-wide masterminds and monthly to look at this. So we'll do one in the evening, one in the morning. I think the first one's going to be, we haven't set the date yet, like for sure, it's I think March 7th. I know we're going to get the date out. It's just a week away. But we're going to do a soft launch, and then April we'll have a couple more. And then we'll have them on some sort of schedule, but those will be monthly. So I've been spending a lot of time last couple of weeks taking a pretty deep dive into this, and I'm pretty excited about it.
That's really exciting, John. Who are they for? Who are they open to?
They're open to current students at Coach Training EDU and any alumni.
I'm really excited. And when you say mastermind, can you give a taster of what we might expect?
Yeah, so the first one, the top of the first one is going to be developing your ideal client profile. Your ICP, like who are you really, gearing your practice towards? Who do you want to work with? Who can you provide value to? And then understanding, what are their challenges? What are their fears? What are the moments in their lives when they think, yeah, like this is something that that they would want to work with a coach, it's just, it's amazing. And then go find them, talk to them, interview them, go out and actually find your ideal customer, and not ask them to be your client. That's that can wait till later, but to ask them all those questions, like what is it. Ask them the challenges, ask them their fears, ask them their moments when they think, yeah, like this is where I need help, and really get into that space. I did this like unconsciously, when I was working, not unaware. I did this when I was working with students, talking to their parents. It took me about a year to figure out how to position coaching so I could, build my client base. But this is the first time where I've taken, I've worked with sales and marketing advisors, experts, consultants to help me to design this and deliver it. So yeah, I feel like it's much more robust than anything that we've put together in the past. Yeah, it's good. It's really good.
Well, I can't wait to maybe pop in myself as well. Is this for any coach who either has a business or is looking to grow their business? Is that how we're aiming?
Yes, it's mostly geared to coaches who are developing an independent practice, not necessarily coaches who are trying to, either work in a school or a program. However, I do think it is best practice, if you are an administrator in a school or organization, that you approach with the same level of rigor, like as if it were your own business, and really interview your students. From a standpoint of how can we position this coaching offering in a way that doesn't feel like it's remedial or feel like it's a pain, but something that you would actually want to do and something that could help you. These are really valuable insights. I was talking to somebody who, like an administrator at school, who had a program. Her problem now is that students are now booking her too much as a coach, because they're just liking the sessions. They're just, yeah, this is great. So now, so that's the challenge, right? It's how do you communicate so that students know what to expect, how much they can get out of this program and session. So yeah, it's endlessly fascinating. And yeah, that's what we're gonna have rolling out.
Thank you, John. And positioning is a great thing to think about, isn't it? And often coaches, they train as coaches, and they love all the aspects of it. But, I hear questions such as, I don't know how to describe coaching, or I don't know how to position coaching out there to the world. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, start with who your ideal customer is and speak to the challenges that they have. Because coaching is not a solution. Coaching is not something that people think, oh, like if I apply a coaching band-aid, then this will work. It's more like coaching is a pathway to a solution. And understand that difference between, it's very similar to a car is not, a car is it's a vehicle. It's a means to get you somewhere. But the real problem is transportation. Right? The real problem is how to get from point A to point B. And so it's a subtle, but it's important shift, because then you start talking about, it's very similar to transportation. Like there are many different ways you can get from point A to point B. And a car just happens to be one of the most convenient, but is the best way to get if you want to get from across the country. No, it's not. You want to hop on an airplane. So the same way, it's that level of thinking. It's like, so it's not looking at the coaching practice. And every coaching training, every coach who's in a practice, I feel like, and myself included, when I was in there, it was like going through a puppy stage, where you're like, every coaching this, coaching that, you're coaching your friends, your people, your family, your everything. It's all about coaching, which is fine for a brief period of time. But when there's a potential client, they're not thinking, they're not thinking coaching. They're thinking, oh, I have this challenge. Like my child is having a really hard time, having a tough time in school, or this thing, like what do I need to do? What can be helpful? So coaching is a way to get them from A to B, but I wouldn't confuse the path with the vehicle.
What advice do you have for new coaches who are trying to skip the path, or have this urge to provide a solution?
I was working with a consultant, a week ago, and I could tell like he wants to make sure that I'm walking away with a piece of advice that's worth the hourly rate that he's charging. And in my mind, I'm thinking, he is so coaching the problem. He's trying to problem hunt and solution provide, which is fine. But I feel like the deeper work that coaching offers is an insight that can change not just this one problem, but change the rest of the person's life. So I feel like the same thing with coaching is that there's a difference between the marketing of coaching, which is problem centric. You have to look at, how do you communicate the value to somebody, something that's invisible, something that you can't necessarily touch, but how do you communicate that value that's very problem centric? The coaching model itself is it's person centric. So those are two extremely different ways of viewing the world. Coaches have to be, if you're establishing an independent practice, you have to be good at both of them at the same time.
Why do you think coaching has been marketed as problem-centric for so long?
Well, I think marketing coaching as problem-centric is good. I feel like that's what you want in terms of your marketing. The problem with the coaching marketing is that the problem I see with a lot of coach marketing is that it focuses on coaching. It focuses on explaining what coaching is. It focuses on all of the things that the coach themselves are really immersed in. Like, oh wow, powerful questions, levels of listening, imaginative inquiry, like all of those things like that. But those are the tools that you use. It's the marketing of coaching, needs to shift away from that.
You're making me think of sometimes when I'm mentoring coaches or new coaches who are in the business or exec world, or working with executive clients and corporations, and they feel that they need to add value by solving a problem or jumping in quickly, or kind of trying to fix it.
Exactly. So what's your reaction when that happens? How do you react? Either if it's you as a client or you see an executive doing that.
Well, I actually had somebody practice it on me because they were sharing with me that they felt that that's what they need to do first, right? They want to bring the client along, and they were struggling to find a way to go deeper. Even though they had the questions, they didn't feel the questions would land, or perhaps the person wasn't ready for that level of coaching. So something for us all to think about. There's lots of assumptions there, isn't it? And the 3 trusts have gone out the window at that point, if we're making assumptions. But when I was experiencing it, I was on the receiving end. I didn't like it, actually. It made me feel inadequate, or that I didn't have the ability to solve it for myself when I was being told. So the questions were going towards, well, have you tried this? And of course, my ego was like, of course I've tried that. I have systems in place.
That's so funny.
So that leads me nicely, actually, to an executive coaching question. So, John, I'm an executive coach, and it's clear that my CEO client lacks the self-awareness to recognize his leadership deficiencies are an obstacle to his company's growth. How do I help him get out of his own way?
Yeah. I feel like this might apply to all CEOs, all leaders. I think there's a way to do it. Well, okay. I have a friend who's a CFO, Chief Financial Officer. And we share a lot of ideas back and forth. And I think the main thing is, the main piece of advice is to really put yourself in the position of the CEO and try to imagine what the CEO cares about the most. Like really deeply listen level 2, like go into that and become curious. Like and ask, like, what's the biggest challenge right now you're dealing with? What's the biggest frustration? I've settled on, and I know that even in my own journey of, going from, basically a high school Latin teacher to establishing my own practice to running an organization, where like all of those things, like especially running an organization, I've never run one before. So I know I'm going to make mistakes. I know that there's opportunity for me to grow, and I know, like that this needs to get done. I think that there are some leaders and organizations I've worked with, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear, oh, like this is where they need to grow. This is where they need to be different. And that's a challenge. That's a really big challenge. And I have a lot of compassion where that comes from, having run an organization, because it's a little bit like the person in the arena. Like it's easier for people who are not in, running the organization to go, oh, they could do this differently, they could do that differently, they could be like this. Fine. But when you're actually in there running the show, it goes so fast. It's like listening to a coaching session versus being the one who's doing the coaching, who's coaching. Like when you're in a coaching session, it's fast. There's so much material coming at you. There's so many things. If you listen to a recording, you can go, oh, you know what? I could have done this better, could have done that better, could have done this better, could have done that better. So I would challenge whoever's asking the question first, have the first step in this is to have incredible compassion for the CEO and understand that CEO, the pressure that person is under is immense. It's going to be a lot. And so the CEO is acting in that way for a reason. And most people do the very best they can, given the options that they have. It's not like the CEO is trying to mess it up. So it's compassion. It's going over there and really going level 2 and then becoming curious about it. Like getting into their worldview and looking at all of these problems, looking at all of this stuff from the CEO perspective, which is different from an employee perspective. So you have to, like, the first step is really getting over there, getting curious. What's it like? From there, You're going to get insights. And CEOs, one of the most valuable things CEOs recognize is when an employee starts to think like them and realize, okay, like from the CEO perspective, this is what it's like to think like them. Oh my goodness. Oh, that's gold. That's like, yes, thank you. Someone is looking at this from my perspective on it. And it's like, yeah, that's amazing. That's what you want. And I'm so curious, Raj, your take on this too, because I feel like this is a really, really good question.
It is. And I just want to acknowledge what you said as well. You talked about having empathy and compassion, stepping into their shoes. And perhaps there is that piece, as you said, around acknowledgement. You're acknowledging their journey also to this point, and the growth and the celebration. And I think sometimes for individuals, this is a lonely journey, isn't it? At the top to where they have come to or where they've got to. So, I was thinking about some of these pieces. The other thing is you might be helping somebody, a leader in an organization, a CEO, to look at things that they've never looked at before. They've become successful potentially from doing the things versus focusing on what we talk in coaching around the beings. The being pieces and values and mission. And one of the things that helped me working with senior leaders is helping them and empowering them to remember the why, the vision, the values. It reminds me of a module I did myself with you, John, in the 2.0 program, where we looked at company shared values. And what is the culture that the leader wants to create. So those are some of the things there around the meaningful pieces and helping the CEO and leader to connect. And then there might be this other side that I've had to do as well around holding that mirror up and direct communication. And you've got to be courageous as a coach. And maybe this is where you bring in a 360 overview assessment. I work with leaders which often have done staff surveys, and they have to read things that are uncomfortable for them to read and see. I'll stop there, John, and see what your thoughts are on what I'm sharing.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I think working in business, I think that let's say that there's this myth out there that working in business doesn't require personal and professional growth. From again, academia standpoint, business is, not as worthy of like study or attention, right? Like, it's more like, I think there's this, let's call it a slight pervasive thing. And let's say you also have a background in classics, like you literally spent your years studying Latin and ancient Greek, and then you get out into the business world and you realize, whoa, there's this whole element that you are aware of, right? And what I'm seeing now, and the work that I've done as an executive coach, is some of the executives I've worked with are some of the most amazing people I have ever met. And part of it is they have to develop a heart for people, even when people are so uncool. The executives, like in these spaces, have to have a space of not taking it personal, being like, you know what, this is the way this organization is going. Like that's a tremendous asset and skill that that executives have. Some executives haven't yet developed that. And I feel like that's one of the biggest things that holds back the executives I've worked with, is this sort of egoic, like, no, like it's an unwillingness to change, an unwillingness to really move off of that. So if it's incredible too, sometimes these organizations, I mean, they're doing lots of money. Like they're we're talking revenue in the tens of millions a year. And oftentimes when the revenue gets like that, some of the situations and wonkiness just increases too, because you just have these odd dynamics and, in I've coached them, I've seen them, and when an executive, when you can really reach them, and it might be as an employee, it might not be your job to do it. It might be your job to, figure out how you can get your executive a coach, or get your executive a consultant or a program or something to do it. And this is where a lot of executive coaches make their money, because the stakes are so high. It's worth $1,000, at least $1,000 an hour. It's worth like so much if the executive can figure this out. So I feel like I'm rambling on a little bit, but it's executives, if there's an incentive and they see the benefit of them changing, they will change.
Yeah. And it makes me think of Marshall Goldsmith's book, isn't it? What got you here won't get you there. And it's a great read, actually. Great tips in there.
That's what he does. That's why Marshall makes his money, is because the organization will say, yeah, this person needs to do this, this, this. He gets in there and says, hey, this is what needs to happen. So the person, in these positions, it's Marshall telling them, this is what you need to do to change. It's challenging when you are an employee to tell someone, hey, this is what you need to do to change. I think it's the setup itself is really hard. It's really hard.
So now, John, we have an employee question. So I am an in-house executive coach. The manager of a department is unable to stop her micromanaging tendencies and trust her employees to do the jobs. Turnover is high, staff are stressed, withdrawn, and overworked. How do I help this manager see the impact of her actions and the impact they're having on the department?
I think it's got to be outcome focused first, is wondering, like, what are the outcomes that the department needs to hit? And then, running tests on it. Can you hit the outcomes doing something different? That's I think anytime a manager feels like they have to get in there, there's probably a stressor or something, that there's an outcome that's not being hit that needs to be hit. It's not like people enjoy, like, again, you got to get over her, get into her side, like get into thinking the way she's thinking. Like, I would imagine, like, she has pressure, she needs certain outcomes, so she's doing what's necessary to get those outcomes. Right? It's not like people get in there and say, oh, I really want to micromanage, or I really want to manage. No, that takes energy, that's effort, that's work. That's not fun. That's happening for a reason. So if you can show, like, hey, like, let's do a little experiment here for this period of time and see if we still get these same outcomes. Yeah. But you're not going to, I don't think it would go over well to say, hey, stop micromanaging us with no, like, just like with no regard for why she's doing what she's doing. It's not going to work.
So help her to really understand why she's doing it, help her to understand who she is. I love the values exercise. I do values exercise with individuals quite early on when I'm working with them. And, what are the values driving her to perhaps behave in this way as well?
Yeah, like, what are the pressures? Like, what are the outcomes that need to be hit? And then what are they being hit or not? So it's a lot of this stuff, when you get into business stuff, it's got to be data driven. And executives, people, they look at data. Data's great. Just going off of feelings, it's a messy business. If you're in the people business, it's going to be messy. But again, you have to be able to manage that. You got to think like a professional, feel like a professional. There's a certain competitive advantage if you have a very strong empathy muscle to get over and really truly consider, like, what is it like to be them.
So John, I know we're at time, but it sounds like the theme throughout this today has really been to step into others' shoes, isn't it? Really understand them and get a feel of their world. how would you close us out today? What words of wisdom do you have?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's even similar to the business building ideas too. Is successful marketing involves empathy, involves getting over there into your ideal client profile, getting into their world. Successful business communication requires getting over there, getting into their world. Yeah, I mean, it's a tie. It ties it all together. I remember once when I was first getting coach trained, like I was in the training pretty heavy, and only a year or two later, I was playing with a 1-year-old, and I remember going empathetic with the 1-year-old for about 15 minutes. This isn't like that coach puppy stage. I'm like, I wonder if you can go empathetic with the 1-year-old. And it was not my 1-year-old. It was, I still remember it. It was a remarkable experience. It seems ridiculous. I mean, even just saying it out loud, like, what's the big deal? But really like imagining what it was like to be her, that 1-year-old, in that space. To me, it just felt like the world just like became full of wonder. Right? It just became like this toddling, or, just like, and I think it's an exercise. I feel like it's a muscle. It's a muscle that everyone has. I've trained people in it. I've seen it myself, like how to go over, get empathy, like go into that space. I feel like it's a muscle that you can stretch, you can improve. It's something that I want to actively get better at too. But that's it. I feel like it's the awareness of, oh, you can do this. It's really useful, and everyone can actively become better at it all the time. It's not like it's a one-time thing. It's a practice more than anything else.
Thank you, John. A great reminder for us to close out on. Empathy.
These questions are so lovely. I know next week you're going to be meeting. I won't be here next week with you. Ashley will be here, right?
Yeah. International Women's Day.
And then, yeah. So, yeah. Thank you for these. It's quite lovely. It's good to see you. And
thank you. And thank you, John. And thank you, everyone, for listening. And as usual, send us your questions. Let us know if you even want to appear on the podcast. So we look forward to hearing from everyone. Take care. Bye.